His fingers hovered near the holster, eyes locked on the woman in the driver's seat, calm, robed, unshaken. "Are you detaining me, officer?" she asked, her voice cutting sharply through the crowd now gathering, phones raised, silence heavy. And when she stepped out of the car, robe catching the wind, she said loud enough for every camera, "This is what it takes for a black woman to be heard." The sun had just begun to slide behind the oaks lining Willowbend Drive, casting long golden slashes across the pavement and brick mailboxes. Officer Nathan Rusk blinked against the glare as he sipped lukewarm coffee from a stained department thermos, his fourth cup of the day. The cruiser's dashboard clock read 6:48 p.m., just over an hour to go before he was off duty. He'd already checked off most of his patrol loop: noise complaint near Ashley Hall, loose dog call by the country club. Nothing serious, just the kind of day he liked, quiet, predictable. Until he saw it. A sleek black 2023 Audi A8 glided to a soft stop at the intersection of Willowbend and Crofton Lane. It paused a second too long, not enough to be illegal, but just long enough to tug at his attention. Nathan straightened slightly in his seat. There were no plates on the rear, just a temporary tag tucked behind a tinted window. That, and the slow roll forward, gave him pause. Rich cars in rich neighborhoods weren't unusual, but something about this one didn't sit right. He flicked on his lights and eased out from under the shadow of a magnolia tree, rolling up behind the Audi. "Unit 9 to 7, initiating a traffic stop," he said into the radio. Black Audi A8, no visible plate, single-occupant vehicle pulled over on Willowbend just past Crofton. The Audi obeyed without hesitation, signaling and pulling smoothly toward the curb under the shade of a dogwood tree. Nathan approached slowly, hand resting near his holster, eyes scanning the interior before he even reached the window. The window lowered halfway before he knocked. "Good evening, officer," said the voice inside, clear, calm, carrying no trace of alarm. Nathan hesitated. The driver was a black woman, mid-60s by his estimate. Silver hair cut close to the scalp, face set with the kind of composure you don't fake. She wore a full black judicial robe, seatbelt across her chest, posture upright, hands visible on the steering wheel. "I'm Judge Cassandra Lell," she said with a slight nod. "And this is my vehicle. I'm driving home from the courthouse." Nathan blinked. That wasn't what he'd expected. He cleared his throat. "License and registration, ma'am." She handed them over without hesitation. "Any particular reason I was stopped?" He flipped through the documents while glancing at her over the edge of his aviators. Everything matched. Cassandra Lell, 62, issued from the South Carolina DMV. The registration listed her home address, a $500,000 colonial about 3 blocks away. Still, something about it stuck in his ribs. "This vehicle matches the description of one reported as possibly stolen earlier today," he said, letting his words hang longer than necessary. Cassandra raised an eyebrow. "That's surprising. It's been in my possession since February. Certified pre-owned, purchased from the Audi dealership on King Street. You're welcome to confirm with dispatch." "I will," he said and stepped back to his cruiser. But as he sat behind the wheel, eyes locked on her through the windshield, he didn't radio it in right away. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't reaching for anything, just sitting there, watching the sky dim one layer at a time. Finally, he called it in. "Dispatch, I need to confirm on registration for Audi A8, tag ending in 4921. 2 minutes passed. Then the crackle, vehicle registered to Cassandra Lell. No stolen reports. All checks out. Unit 97. Nathan leaned back but didn't return the papers. He walked back to the car slower this time, one hand still ghosting near his hip. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle for me, ma'am." Her voice didn't sharpen, at least not at first. "Is that a lawful order, Officer Rusk?" He answered, "Yes, standard protocol." A beat of silence stretched. "Are you detaining me?" I'm asking you to step out so we can clear this up. Phones were up now. A few teens on the sidewalk had stopped walking. Bun was already filming. Cassandra's voice rose, not in anger but in clarity. I am Judge Cassandra Lell, serving on the 11th Circuit Court. This vehicle is mine. It is not stolen and you have confirmed this with dispatch. Are you now unlawfully detaining me? Nathan didn't respond right away. His jaw was set. He could feel his fingers twitching near his belt and forced them still. From across the street, someone called out, "She's a judge, man." That's Judge Lell. Still, Nathan stood his ground. I asked you to step out of the vehicle, he repeated. And I asked, she said, voice level, if this is legal. A soft command came from the sidewalk, "Get your hand off your belt, officer." He hadn't realized he was doing it again. He exhaled and stepped back slightly. Cassandra rolled her window up 2 inches, not slamming it, just enough. Her profile turned forward like she was done talking, but the tension didn't break. It swelled. A woman in workout clothes whispered, "That's the judge who sentenced that banker last month. She's no joke." Then another cruiser rolled up behind Nathan's. Officer Dana Ridley stepped out, tall and composed, blonde ponytail swinging behind her. She took one look at the scene, the crowd, the phones, the woman in robes behind the wheel, and her expression stiffened. "Everything okay here?" she asked, voice low as she approached Nathan. "Possible match on a stolen vehicle," he replied tightly, trying to verify some details. Dana looked into the car. Her face changed. "That's Judge Lell." "I know. You need to wrap this up." "I'm trying." "No, you're escalating." Cassandra cracked her window a little farther. "Officer Ridley," she said smoothly, "I assume you recognize me." "I do, Your Honor." "Then you understand the gravity of what's happening." Dana nodded slowly, eyes flicking toward the crowd. Some were live streaming now. Comments scrolled up on one teen's screen, "This happening now on Willowbend, judge being harassed." Nathan stepped forward. She could have swapped plates. Dana frowned. "You're reaching." "I'm doing my job." "You're digging in." Cassandra held up her judicial badge through the window. Dana examined it, then turned back to Nathan. "She's good to go. All of it checks out, including this." You're done here." But he didn't move. So Cassandra did something no one expected. She turned off the engine, opened the door, and stepped out. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. She stood, her robe catching the wind, her posture commanding. "This is what it takes," she said evenly, eyes scanning the phones, the badges, the faces, for a black woman to be heard. Nathan's fingers twitched again. Dana's voice snapped through the moment, "Don't." He froze. Cassandra didn't look at him. She looked past him. "You enforce the law," she said. "But I interpret it. I live it. And tonight I was almost punished for existing within it." Nathan didn't answer. Couldn't. The crowd grew still. Not quiet. Not yet. Just heavy. And as Cassandra stepped back into her car and closed the door without slamming it, the silence cracked wider than any shout could have. She drove away, tail lights glowing red and regal as the street swallowed her whole, and Officer Nathan Rusk was left standing in the golden dusk, wondering when doing his job had turned into something else entirely. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 2 in the same tone and structure? Officer Nathan Rusk didn't remember walking back to his cruiser. He only remembered the echo of his own footsteps and the quiet click of Judge Cassandra Lell's car door shutting with a finality that sounded more like a verdict than anything she'd said aloud. Her Audi had drifted away like a gavel stroke through the last light of day, her tail lights fading into the dusk while he stood there, still hot and humiliated, in front of a crowd that no longer respected the badge on his chest. He'd meant to do his job, but somehow doing his job had turned into being the problem. The crowd dispersed slowly. No yelling, no chants. Just phone still recording and a few murmurs that stung worse than shouting. He thought she stole that car. A judge? That man needs to sit down somewhere. She handled it better than most would have. Nathan's radio chirped, dispatch asking for his status, but he didn't answer. He sat behind the wheel, staring out at the dogwood tree where the whole thing had started, the thin branches swaying like they were whispering something he didn't want to hear. By the time he returned to the Charleston PD substation, the video had already made its way across neighborhood group chats. Within an hour it hit Twitter. By midnight it was being reposted on national watchdog accounts, then circulated by news aggregators with captions like "Veteran cop detains, black judge without cause," and "Charleston incident highlights persistent bias in law enforcement." In the grainy video, the moment Cassandra stepped from the car, her robe catching the wind, had already been screenshotted and turned into a meme. Under it, words read, "This is what it takes to be heard." Officer Dana Ridley had sent him a single text before her shift ended, "You need to get ahead of this." But Nathan didn't respond. He sat in his apartment on the edge of North Charleston, lights off, phone buzzing every few seconds with forwarded links, tags, and updates he didn't want to see. His wife was out of town visiting her sister in Raleigh. His teenage son had called earlier asking if everything was okay. Nathan had lied, said it was a routine stop, nothing major. The truth was something had cracked open, and he wasn't sure what he was seeing now was what the rest of the world always had. The next morning, the Charleston Police Department issued a formal statement. "We are aware of a video circulating online regarding a traffic stop conducted by one of our officers. The matter is under internal review." Internal Affairs called him in before his first cup of coffee. Captain Wells didn't smile when he walked into the room. "We've got a problem," he said simply. Nathan sat down without a word. "There's a 40-second gap in your body cam footage, right when Judge Lell says you touched a wrist." The mute toggle was activated. Nathan's stomach tightened. Must have hit it by accident. You'd be surprised how often that excuse gets used, but rarely when a sitting judge is involved. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble." "I thought you thought." Wells's voice sharpened. "You thought she didn't belong in that car." Nathan looked away. He didn't have an answer that wouldn't make it worse. "We're placing you on administrative leave. Effective immediately. Standard review pending investigation. Turn in your badge and weapon before you leave the building." The walk back to his locker felt longer than the shift he just worked. Around him, other officers avoided eye contact, conversation stopping when he passed. Dana Ridley didn't look away when he crossed her path. She looked straight at him. "You should have let her go," she said. "You knew better." "Did I?" he asked, voice low, because it didn't feel wrong until it was already too late. Dana studied him for a beat. "Then maybe it's time to figure out why that is." Across town, Cassandra Lell sat at her kitchen table in a white cotton robe, a mug of untouched black coffee cooling beside her. Her judicial robe hung over the back of a dining chair, still creased from the night before. Her phone had buzzed non-stop since sunrise, calls from reporters, texts from colleagues, even a voicemail from the mayor offering a public apology and any assistance needed. She hadn't replied to any of them. The house was silent, filled with the kind of stillness that usually came after a long day in court, but today it felt heavier. She watched the footage again, not because she needed to but because she couldn't not. Her own voice sounded foreign, controlled, deliberate. The tone of someone used to being doubted and preparing for it in advance. She watched the way Rusk shifted near his holster. The way his eyes never quite met hers. She watched the precise moment his hand reached out toward her wrist. And then the silence. The camera audio dropped off like someone had slammed a door. Her father's words echoed in the space the footage left behind. "The robe doesn't make you invisible. It just makes the doubt harder to justify. He'd said that to her when she passed the bar. Back when he was still a beat cop in Columbia, one of the first black officers in his precinct. He knew this world too well. Knew it could turn on you. Not because you did something wrong, but because someone else thought you might have. At 11:23 a.m., Cassandra finally responded to one person, her judicial clerk, Leah. Bring tomorrow's docket by. I'm not canceling court. That evening, she stood at the window overlooking her driveway, watching a group of teenagers walk past, phones out, whispering. One pointed toward her house. Another held up a phone, angling it. Just right. She didn't wave. She didn't hide. Let them record. Let them see her, just standing still here, still unshaken. At the Charleston PD station, Nathan sat in the empty locker room staring at the badge in his hand before setting it down. A thin white envelope waited in his inbox, bias reflection assignment due prior to reinstatement review. He didn't open it. Not yet. Officer Dana Ridley walked in after a long shift, dropping her gear bag on the bench beside him. You think this blows over? He asked. She didn't answer right away. I think it shouldn't. And if you're smart, you'll stop asking how to make it disappear and start asking how not to let it happen again. It wasn't about her being black. Wasn't it? He started to protest, but the words dissolved. Dana stood and headed for the door. You didn't see a judge, Nate. You didn't see a woman. You saw something you didn't expect and decided it must be wrong. That's bias. And it's yours to fix. Outside, the protest began to build, not massive but focused. Signs read, "Respect is the law." And, "Black robes, white fear." A live streamer's caption read, "Cassandra Lell didn't need to prove she was a judge. She needed to survive being seen as a black woman first." Inside her home, Cassandra looked over a stack of handwritten letters that had arrived by courier. One stood out, from a college student. You reminded me that staying calm doesn't mean staying quiet. She set the letter down and stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't peace she felt, it was pressure. But it was familiar. It was necessary. Because this wasn't over. The hearing was coming. And this time, the cameras wouldn't be on the judge. They'd be on the system that made what happened possible in the first place. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 3 in the same voice and pacing? The letter from the student still sat open on Cassandra Lell's desk the morning of the hearing, its words echoing louder than the news anchors outside who had gathered on the courthouse steps. You reminded me that staying calm doesn't mean staying quiet. She had read it 3 times before placing it beneath a legal pad. It was the kind of sentence that didn't just flatter. It stayed with you, carved into the mind like a closing argument that refused to fade. Her robe hung by the door, pressed and heavy. She hadn't worn it since the night Officer Rusk had reached for her wrist and muted the camera. Not in panic, not in chaos, but in control. Because silence gave his version space to grow. That silence had been his protection. But today, every word would be on the record. At 9:15 a.m., Judge Cassandra Lell stepped into a modest municipal chamber at the Charleston Oversight Office where 5 members of the review committee sat at a long raised table beneath the seal of the city. It wasn't the grand courtroom she was used to. There were no marble columns, no gallery seats for legal observers, just folding chairs, water, pictures, a few cameras, and a row of public attendees, some with signs rolled up at their feet. The air buzzed with that specific type of quiet that only comes when truth is about to be measured, not with sympathy, but with precision. Cassandra sat at the center table alone, hands folded, spine straight. She didn't fidget. Didn't sip water. Just watched. Officer Nathan Rusk entered from the side room, 10 minutes later, dressed in a navy blazer and khakis, no badge, no gun. Just the weight of being publicly reduced to a decision made under a street lamp. He didn't look toward her, but he knew she was there. His palms had swept through his notepad before he even reached the chair. Across the room, Officer Dana Ridley stood silently near the rear wall. She wasn't called to testify, but her presence was unmistakable, a kind of anchor, in case the truth needed more weight. Chairwoman Vera Lindell, a retired judge from Charleston County, called the hearing to order. This review will consider the professional conduct of Officer Nathan Rusk in relation to the incident on Willowbend Drive involving Judge Cassandra Lell. We will begin with the presentation of body camera footage. The video played on a monitor behind the committee. No narration, no commentary, just the cold clarity of what had happened. The stop. The questions. Cassandra's measured answers. Rusk's clipped tone. The moment his hand drifted near his holster. The shift in her voice. The rising crowd. And then, minute 11:11. Black screen. No audio. 40 seconds of official silence. When the audio resumed, Cassandra's voice was calm again, but different now, firmer. "You're violating my rights." Vera Lindell paused the video. "Officer Rusk, can you explain the mute gap on your department-issued body cam?" Nathan cleared his throat, voice already dry. "It was accidental. I didn't realize I'd pressed it. The department's log shows the mute toggle was activated manually." "Yes, ma'am." "You reached for her wrist during that gap?" "Yes." "Was she non-compliant?" "No." "Then why reach for her?" The question hung longer than his answer. I misread the situation." "Did you believe she posed a threat?" "No." "Did she raise her voice?" "No." "Did she make any movements that indicated danger?" "No." "Then what made you escalate the stop?" Silence. Nathan's mouth opened, but the words refused to line up. Across the room, Cassandra still hadn't moved. Not in triumph. Not in condemnation. Just watched. Just bore it like she'd been trained to do her whole life. Vera Lindell turned. "Judge Lell, would you like to make a statement?" Cassandra stood, not hurried, not hesitant. She stepped to the podium, adjusted the microphone once, and began. "I have spent more than 30 years in service to the law. I've sat through sentencing hearings, suppression motions, bail reviews, and jury trials. Every day, I make decisions that change lives. And I do it knowing that justice is not just about law. It is about how that law is applied. That night, I followed every instruction. I provided every document. I identified myself clearly. But none of it mattered. Not to the officer standing outside my window. To him, I was not a judge. I was not a public servant. I was not a woman headed home after a 14-hour day in court. I was simply a black driver in a nice car in the wrong neighborhood." He looked at me and saw a question mark, one he'd already decided he had the right to answer for himself. Her voice never wavered. And when the facts didn't support his suspicion, he made a choice, to prolong it, to question my means, to mute his camera, to reach for my body. Those are not procedural errors. They are decisions. And decisions like that come from somewhere. She looked directly at Nathan. "Now this is not about personal shame. It's about professional accountability. Because if someone with my visibility, with my status, can be treated this way, then what happens to those without the robe, without the platform, without the crowd?" She stepped back. "Justice is not just a verdict. It is a practice. And last week, it failed." The room didn't clap. It didn't need to. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. The committee recessed for deliberation. 35 minutes later, they returned. Vera Lindell didn't soften the blow. "This committee finds Officer Nathan Rusk engaged in conduct unbecoming of his position. His actions were excessive, unsupported by evidence, and indicative of biased assumptions inconsistent with departmental training. We recommend a 60-day unpaid suspension, mandatory participation in bias retraining, and flagging of this incident in his personnel record. Further violations will result in immediate termination. Murmurs rippled across the room. Some thought it was too light. Others, too harsh. Nathan just nodded once before lowering his eyes. The hearing closed. As Cassandra walked out the front doors into a sea of flashing cameras, a reporter called out, "Judge Lell, do you feel justice was served today?" She paused at the top of the steps. "Justice is not a verdict," she repeated. "It's a commitment, and we're not done yet." That afternoon, back at the 11th Circuit Court, Cassandra presided over a probation hearing for a 17-year-old boy caught shoplifting at a convenience store. He stood stiffly beside a nervous public defender, shirt tucked too tight, eyes darting. Cassandra reviewed his file. First offense, single-parent home, suspended twice but no pattern of violence. She leaned forward. "Do you understand why you're here?" "Because I messed up," the boy said. "That's part of it, but you're here because you got caught. The real question is whether you understand what this could become." He nodded quickly. "I do. I don't want to come back here." Cassandra glanced at his mother seated behind him, hands knotted in her lap like a woman holding both prayer and worry. "I believe you, but belief isn't enough. I'm continuing your probation without extension. No jail. But next time, there will be no conversation. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once, tapped the gavel. Case closed. He turned to leave, shoulders visibly light. His mother exhaled for the first time in 5 minutes. Across town, Nathan Rusk sat at his kitchen table. No uniform, no patrol calls, just a blank notepad in a form that read, "Bias reflection required submission." He'd started it 4 times, deleted it 4 more. This time, he wrote one sentence. "I didn't see her, not as a judge, not even as a woman, just as a possibility I had already made up my mind about." Then he kept writing, not to defend, not to erase, but to understand. Because silence wasn't safe anymore. Not for him. Not for anyone. Just as he was beginning to learn, bias wasn't just something you upheld. It was something you answered to every day, especially when it was hardest. Would you like me to now help package the full story into a YouTube script for us? Instructive stories. Sometimes the most powerful moments in life aren't loud, they're measured. They come not in the form of courtroom rulings or public outrage but in quiet decisions to stay calm, to speak truth, and to hold the line when it would be easier to walk away. The story of Judge Cassandra Lell is not just about a traffic stop gone wrong. It's about how fragile respect can be, even when it's earned over decades. It's about the danger of assumptions, the weight of silence, and the courage it takes to speak with clarity instead of anger. It reminds us that injustice doesn't always scream. Sometimes it shows up in a question that's asked one too many times or a hand that reaches too far when words would have been enough. For those in positions of authority, whether you're wearing a badge, holding a gavel, or simply have the power to influence another person's day, this story serves as a powerful warning. Power without self-awareness becomes a weapon. And silence in the face of misuse isn't neutral. It's part of the problem. Accountability isn't about punishment. It's about reflection, about growth, and about preventing the same mistake from becoming a pattern. To those who've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or doubted because of how you look or where you're from, Judge Lell's experience may be painful to witness, but it also shows the strength of staying rooted in truth. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. And in doing so, she reminded a city and a country that dignity is not something you earn from others. It's something you carry even when it's tested. To our listeners and supporters here at Narrative Tales Stories, thank you. Thank you for taking time to sit with difficult truths, for choosing to listen with intention, and for believing like we do that stories like these matter. If this story moved you, made you think, or opened your eyes in a new way, we invite you to stay connected. Subscribe, share, and help us continue shining light on the moments that reveal who we are and who we can become. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice to start a conversation. And conversations like these, they change.